Hey, welcome to React Roundup, the podcast where we keep you updated on all things React related. This show is sponsored by Raygun and produced by Top End Devs and Envoy. Top End Devs is where we create top end devs to get top end pay and recognition for working on interesting problems and making meaningful community contributions. And Envoy, which provides remote design and software development services on the most client-friendly business model. So clients only pay after the tasks are delivered and approved. In today's episode, we will talk about um, flight control, and basically this is a tool that allows developers to not have to worry too much about DevOps when they deploy their applications. So it's going to be around the subject of developer operations. My name is Lucas Paganini, your host in the podcast. Joining me in today's episode is also the host, Chris Ruin.
Hello, everybody.
And we have a very special guest, which is the CEO and co-founder of FlightControl, Brendan Bayer.
Excited to be here.
Thank you for being here, Brendan. Let's just get into it. So, Brendan, I'm sure you have explained this a million times already, but let's do it one more. Can you pitch flight control to the audience, please?
Good thing. It never gets old. It's my baby. So, Flight Control is a platform as a service for deploying applications, servers, databases, static sites to your own AWS account. Now, why your own AWS account? Because it enables us to leapfrog traditional platforms as a service on almost every metric. So, for example, you get 2 to 6x faster builds than any other platform, 50 to 75% cheaper compute, and near perfect reliability.
Awesome. Okay. So let's bring it to something that might be a bit more popular in the eyes of front-end developers, and then we can make a comparison to flight control. So to me, at least, I know there are many platforms built on top of the AWS infrastructure and other big clouds, but I think Heroku might be one of the most famous and popular ones. And it is known to be built on top of AWS. You can actually literally do a one-on-one mapping between the Heroku zones and the AWS zones. So if you want something to be in the same data center that you have deployed on AWS, you can just literally choose it in Heroku and it's going to be there. So how does flight control compare to Heroku, or is that not the kind of comparison that we should be making?
Yeah, that's definitely the right comparison. And then the other, Heroku's been around a long time, so there might be actually new people that don't even know about it, but they probably know about Vercel, especially being, in the React space. So Vercel is another, comparison there. And, both of these platforms were created because infrastructure is really hard. And developers want to be able to build applications quickly, ship them to production, and scale them to users all around the world. But if you're using AWS directly, it requires lots of specialized knowledge, skills, time. It's just a pain in the butt. But these platforms like Heroku and Vercel were created to make that so much easier. And they are so much easier. It's incredible. But the problem is that at some point you end up hitting problems and limitations. You hit technical limitations where, maybe you need to customize some part of your infrastructure for security or something else, and you just can't. Or maybe you start getting charged a lot of money because Heroku and Vercel have very high markup over top of the AWS cost. So when you're just getting started, who cares? You can run anywhere. But as you start scaling your app, then it becomes a bigger question there. And I'll just share briefly an experience I had a while back. I think that helps illustrate this. So I was on a trip, and as I entered my Airbnb, I was taken aback because almost every door, cupboard, and appliance had a sticky note on it, and either saying it was off limits or describing the contents. And it was painfully obvious I was living in someone else's house. Like they were dictating everything. You can or cannot do this. And that approximates the experience of using a traditional platform as a service. You are living in someone else's house and you have strictly limited access, unable to go into the utility room, for example, or make upgrades as your needs change. But with Flight Control, you fully own the house, and you invite Flight Control to come in and fully manage all the cleaning, painting, mowing the yard, even doing upgrades and renovations for you. And yes, you pay Flight Control a modest fee for this service, but even after counting your mortgage payment, and your total cost is significantly less than the Airbnb or the Vercel markup with their ridiculous cleaning fees.
Okay, I like the analogy. That does make a lot of sense. But I guess my next question would be, how do you balance having full access while also giving users a simpler facade into how to interact with it, right? So for example, when I initially went to Flight Control's website, I initially made a connection between that and infrastructure as a code tools. So for example, Pulumi or Terraform. And I'm not sure if this is the right comparison that I should be making, but that's what I did at the time, because I thought, oh, okay, it's going to simplify how I interact with AWS, but it's still going to give me control. So perhaps could we also make this comparison between, okay, like we sure can compare Heroku and Vercel to Flight Control. Can we also compare Flight Control to Terraform and Pulumi?
So the reason we created Flight Control was we wanted the ease of use of Vercel and Heroku, but the full control and the scalability of my own AWS account. And so before Flight Control, you had to choose between good developer experience or full control and scalability and no markup. You couldn't get both. But now with Flight Control, you get the best of both worlds, because Flight Control provides that super easy platform as a service developer experience. It's just, click buttons, whatever you want to do, super fast to set up, fully automated. But also, it deploys to your own AWS account. So if you have the skills, then you can, go into your AWS account, you can customize things, override, and you don't have that markup.
But where does that configuration live? Like in the sense of Terraform and Pulumi, I can literally maintain the infrastructure with my versioning system. So if I'm using Git, I can just push commits and change my infrastructure. With Flight Control, where does that configuration would live?
So you get to choose two ways. You can store the configuration in Flight Control, so similar to Heroku or Vercel, where you're just clicking buttons and then it's saved for you. Or you can use infrastructure as code. And this is the infrastructure as code that we have designed that is a higher level abstraction than Terraform or Pulumi. And so our infrastructure as code is designed for developers. So instead of managing IP addresses and subnets and networks in the infrastructure as code, you're defining your services. I need a server, I need a database, I need a static site. Define your build command, your start command. So it's literally the same configuration that you can do through the UI. You can also do it through code and store that in your repository. So we really give you that option. And so everything we do, we try to make it super easy to adopt, but then also cover the complex use cases, as your company scales. Because that's the problem with traditional PaaS, is you hit these scaling limits. And so that's where we're basically systematically removing those.
And how do you approach when the situations where users want to do something that goes beyond the abstractions that Flight Control has created, or that's just not the case? Like, because AWS is a universe of things, right? It's gigantic. So if you were to provide an developer-friendly abstraction in the form of infrastructure as a code for every single thing that exists on AWS, then you would be maintaining a gigantic compilation of commands, right? And maybe that is what you did, but I'm not sure. If that's not what you did, then what happens when a user wants to use something from AWS that the infrastructure as a code provided by flight control doesn't have a connector yet?
Great question. So our goal is to take the best AWS services, which are like, I haven't done the math, but it's like a few percent of all the available AWS services are like the core things that everyone is using. So like EC2, CloudFront, Lambda, RDS. And so these are the most common. And so there's a long tail of AWS services that most people aren't going to need or going to use. So we're focusing on the most common use cases and continually adding support for those. But the beauty of deploying to your AWS account is that you can do custom stuff alongside Flight Control. So you can use Flight Control for everything that it manages. And if you need to do something custom, well, you can do that however you want. And both things can live alongside each other really well. And so we see this, at scale, larger companies. Some companies their product is such that the infrastructure is like almost their product, like it's very critical. It's a core part of their product. But they also have a lot of other applications, like their web application and portals and things that are not core infrastructure. And so it's a waste of their time to manage the infrastructure for that. And so they use Flight Control they will manually manage their own product infrastructure, and then everything else they use Flight Control for, because it allows all the other developers to ship their stuff, without taking time from the product infrastructure team.
Gotcha. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Very complex as well. So I appreciate you for creating this. that definitely saves up a ton of time for us mere mortals. So Peter, Chris, any questions thus far? Like Chris, maybe, do you have anything?
Yeah, just a small thing, I guess, because I'm looking at the site here, and so you mentioned you can do kind of infrastructure as code. Is there a way? Do you guys have like plugin or VS Code where like I have I guess it's JSON you guys are using, and I still get the visualization? Are there possible to get GUI through the website?
So we have JSON schema built into this right now, where the JSON field has a schema field, and a lot of editors support that. And so you do get kind of the inline hints as you're typing your JSON there. You don't get any of the GUI showing up there. That is something we could add. But whenever you create a project in Flight Control, you can use the UI to set up all your configuration, and then you just mark that you want to store it in your code, and we give you the JSON for that. So it kind of covers that use case where you can easily see everything you can do with the UI, and then just copy and paste or download the JSON file, and you're good to go.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I'm with Lucas in this, because if anyone's ever tried to deploy even something as simple as like a server, you think it's super easy, but even with tools like Pulumi, it's like, okay, you need a gateway, and you need rules, and you need security, and yeah.
Yes. You need like 5 to 15 different AWS primitives hooked together in just the right way to run a simple server. And like there's 5 to 15 different ways, and you multiply all the ways this could be connected together or whatever. Like there's so many ways to mess up on security, on whatnot. And so we just do that for you. AWS is super awesome at the low level primitives. Like that's what they are world class at. They're not good at developer experience. They're not good at the higher level layers, but they are absolutely world class at those low level building blocks. And so it actually works out kind of nice, because they can focus on the operational stuff there, the reliability, and then another company like us can come in and really like focus on the developer experience layer, which is this split also enables it's a unique advantage that we have over the traditional platforms as a service, because the traditional platforms are reinventing the wheel on every single thing, because they're like literally have this custom layer of custom software between you and AWS. But with us, we just use whatever AWS has, ECS plus Fargate or ECS plus EC2, RDS for the database, etc. And so we can spend all our resources on the developer experience layer instead of reinventing the wheel on infrastructure.
Okay, so I am very eager to bring a different side of things, which is, what about other cloud providers that maybe already provide a pretty decent developer experience? Talking specifically about DigitalOcean. It's not the hottest kid in the block, but I've always been amazed at how easy they make things, and they are their own provider, right? They have their own data centers. They're not relying on infrastructure from other companies. Why don't just go with that instead of using AWS and trying to figure out what is the right abstraction layer? Why not just go to a provider that it gives you access to the low level stuff, and it's also very easy to set up everything?
Well, I have personally have not like went down that road of DigitalOcean. I've done simple stuff, so I can't fully speak to that. But what I can say is that the market says that AWS is the winner. People keep coming back to AWS over and over because of its reliability, its longevity, its price performance, and the breadth of cloud native services. So if you want to use Lambda, you want to do serverless deployments, you're going to be on AWS. RDS is one of the best managed database services. And so like you're probably going to want that. Also, you're going to at some point work with other vendors that you're maybe purchasing some kind of software as a service and you want to self-host it. It's going to be designed to run on AWS. It's kind of this network effect with AWS where other clouds are running on AWS also, and so the fastest way to access them is you run on AWS in the same AWS data center. So there's just a long list of things like that just push people towards AWS in their level of scale. I think DigitalOcean is fine, it's good. Maybe we'll add support for that at some point. Yeah.
Gotcha. That, with regards to adding support, how do you see support for the other three major players? Because I completely understand that DigitalOcean is at the bottom of the list in terms of like people actually using it on a large scale. I like it very much, but every time it's like I'm trying to convince people of, hey, why don't you just start there? Like you can migrate to a big cloud afterwards. Like there's no need to start with that complexity.
If you're going to
But
migrate later, why not? Why would you start on somewhere that you're going to have to migrate?
because I think that forces you to think about your infrastructure in a way that is independent of the cloud provider. If you already start by knowing that you're going to have to migrate clouds afterwards, then you're not going to make choices that are too specific to one cloud. You're going to think about serverless functions, not with regards to AWS Lambda. You're just going to think about serverless functions. And that forces the engineers to think about how to architect the system in a way that is going to be easy to migrate to others afterwards. And even if you end up staying in just AWS for a very long time, just knowing that your infrastructure can be somewhat easily migrated, because it's never really easy to migrate infrastructure, allows you to have a very good leverage in sales. And it is known that the AWS consultants are going to give you a huge discount if you try to negotiate with them, because they know that you have the power to migrate. So that's basically why.
So yeah, you're the last point is what the point I think you should start with. I think that is really the I think that's the only reason, in my opinion, that you would want to be able to migrate clouds is to negotiate deals like that. Because if you're just like theoretically building your application that to be portable, then you're also wasting a lot of time, engineer brain cycles thinking about that and building that. Whereas like most companies are going to be totally fine on AWS for a very long time. If you reach a point of scale at which it becomes a problem and you need to migrate to your own data center or something, you're going to have so much money and engineers, like who cares at that point? But yeah, it's a good point.
No, that's also a good point. Yeah, in terms of just pushing things to the reality, it's hard to have startups that actually reach that level. So it at a certain point, it would be just easier to not worry about it and just choose one and stick to it. Yeah, that does make sense. Um, anyways, I do think it's hard to choose one nowadays because there are some interesting choices popping up, not just speaking about abstractions on top of providers, but Cloudflare, for example, it's a very good contender that has come up, and there are particular points about Cloudflare's services that I really like. So I wouldn't really say that I would migrate an entire application to Cloudflare or even build an entire application on Cloudflare's infrastructure because they don't support containers in any form. They just have serverless. And I haven't really bought 100% serverless for all cases. I think they're the right cases for it, and there are cases where it's just not the right choice. And but for many other things, I would definitely go with Cloudflare. So I like having a hybrid approach to clouds and picking the parts of their services that best fit my needs and also their pricing and etc. But in any case, I think I got a bit sidetracked. But what I was going to say is you mentioned, oh, perhaps we'll add support for DigitalOcean later on. How do you see support for just Google Cloud and Azure for flight control?
I think that we will support that, probably GCP first and then Azure later, but it's probably going to be a couple years out. Maybe we never do. I don't know. I do know that the GCP is like has so many issues around shutting down services, poor customer support. Like Railway is one of our competitors, for example, that is still mostly built on top of GCP, and they've had like these terrible stories where GCP will just like revoke their quotas, and all of a sudden like stuff is failing, and then you can't get in contact with support, and like you just don't have these kind of things with AWS. And so like definitely there's some advantages there. And then Azure, I think the main reason I hear people going to Azure is because either they're doing .NET stuff or they got a really good deal on the, discounts and whatnot. So, eventually we'll probably support them. But the one thing we do is really go deep on each provider that we support. So there's other competitors that are like right now they support all the clouds, but it's a least common denominator approach where like it's probably Kubernetes and you can deploy the thing wherever, but you don't really get the best version of each cloud because you're just getting the lowest common denominator. And so we were intentional to say, hey, let's go deep on AWS. Let's take the things that AWS is really good at and make those really easy to use.
Nice. Okay. And let's bring this closer to a developer actually wanting to use flight control. What would be the situation? We're talking about React developers here. So let's say that somebody's listening to this, they have started a React application and they just want to put it online. And they know that Vercel is an easy choice, Netlify is an easy choice. When they hear AWS, it doesn't sound easy. How does in practice would look like for this developer to actually use flight control to deploy their application?
So it's going to be almost exactly the same as Vercel or Netlify. You sign up, you connect your GitHub account, You also connect your AWS account, so that's the unique thing. And then, you just define your build command, start command, or it might even be automatically detected. And we have like presets for different frameworks that you can just click and it'll deploy it. So you can deploy a static site, or you can deploy a server, database. So we really support the full breadth there. Um, and but like, why? If you have a side project, we have a free tier, but like you still have to pay for the AWS cost. The static sites are free, but if it's a server, then there's still going to be a little bit of cost. So you're probably fine on Vercel. But if you're building a real business, then why AWS becomes a really kind of important discussion. And reliability is one of the most big important things. So, for example, just this week I was refreshing my kind of industry stats, and our Railway, Fly, and Vercel have all had like almost twice the number of incidents in the past 90 days as a one prior. So to give you some numbers, Fly has had 39 incidents in the past 90 days, and Vercel has had 24 incidents in the past 90 days. But AWS has had, on the services that we support, is 0. So there's just a huge difference on the reliability side. And this is because the traditional platforms have this whole custom layer of infrastructure that they have to manage, and all their traffic is going through that. And so that infrastructure has to support, millions and billions of requests. And it's really hard to build that level, scale of software. But when you deploy through FlightControl, we set up your dedicated infrastructure. And so it sets up a CloudFront, sets up servers, and it's only your traffic going through that. There's no custom stuff that's serving billions of users besides, what AWS does on the back end, but it's nearly flawless.
Nice. Okay, so that means that besides creating my AWS account, like after the account is created, let's say that I only need the abstractions that FlightControl provides, right? Like I don't need anything custom. Then I would only need to create my AWS account, and then I can close AWS and never open it again.
Yes. If you need to edit some AWS billing stuff, then you can. But we show you like the cost that you're paying AWS in our dashboard. We show you the logs. We support the Git push automated deployments. We support preview environments. So we support all the things that you expect, CPU and memory, charts and whatnot.
Nice. Okay. That got me.
Yeah,
I'll
I do
definitely
have
check it
a
out.
question though. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think my question is based on like how does flight control assist in like deploying like server-side Next.js applications? Because I think that's usually like a very big issue for most people on AWS, like to really deploy like SSR applications with Next.js. So I don't know, like, is it something that is being experienced, or is something that maybe flight control should find a way to address? Yeah.
That's a spicy topic. So yes, we many people deploy Next.js applications through flight control, including ourselves. Our own application, our dashboard is Next.js application with the app router. Unfortunately, it's one of the worst decisions I've made in my my career. I'd rather be using Remix. But in fact, I literally just published a blog post today on the Flight Control blog called "The Secret Knowledge to Self-Hosting Next.js." And the reality is that Next.js, when deploying to a server, okay, let me back up. Deploying to a server is the only officially supported way to deploy Next.js outside Vercel. There is a project called OpenNext that helps you deploy serverlessly, but it's not officially supported by Next. So you have to do a bunch of hacks, or the OpenNext does. Also, deploying Next to a server out of the box is not production ready unless you do not have a CDN, you only have one instance, and you're not using image optimization. So for most people, there's a number of things that you have to do to set your Next.js application up to be production ready. And the blog that I published today FlightControl.dev covers all the things that you need to do to make that production ready. And those are things that you have to do even when you're deploying through flight control, because it's Next.js specific and it's in your code. So one of those, for example, is like hooking up, adding a custom cache provider to Redis. Flight control makes it easy to add the Redis, but you still need to add that cache handler in your Next.js config. And so there's examples how to do that and whatnot. But so we do as much as we can, and the infrastructure that we set up fully supports that. We use CloudFront for a CDN, which supports the stale wire validate header, which is important for Next.js. Cloudflare does not support that, for example. And so deploying, if you're going to deploy Next.js outside Vercel, flight control is one of the best ways to do that because of the infrastructure we create.
Yeah, that's really good actually. Yeah, because I think that's usually that have been like a very big problem for so many devs. Kind of like I know a lot of people like hitting their head on the wall, like, oh, next I can't deploy this on AWS. It's like a lot of people I know see Next as kind of vendor locked in, like vendor, like it kind of encourages this vendor lock to vessel kind of. So most people that build Next application will be like, oh yeah, why don't we just use vessel? So I think since you've had like an alternative for like using flight control to also deploy that, that will really be helpful. And I think maybe it will drive people from that whole dilemma of trying to deploy it on their own using whatever means they do. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. We often have people, they hit the scaling limits on Vercel much sooner than they think. They hit the limits of the pro plan, and then they're paying hundreds or thousands of dollars per month to Vercel, which is ridiculous. And they'll switch to flight control and cut that, to a fraction. So it's maybe only 20%, maybe 50%. It kind of depends on, your unique setup there, but you can save a ton of money by using your own AWS because you get rid of all those markups.
Yeah, that's good. That's awesome. Yeah. So Lucas, do you have any question? Chris?
I mean, I could go on forever here. There's a lot of things, but I think that we were able to cover the most critical pieces. But Brenda, do tell me, is there anything that I haven't asked that you feel that is important enough that we should be talking about?
I think I'll just talk about the thing the latest thing we've shipped and the next thing we're working on. So the latest thing we've shipped is a new build system, which is 2 to 6x faster than any other build system on any other provider. And so this is a huge difference. So, for example, the cal.com web app takes around 17 minutes to deploy in Vercel, and it only takes about 3 minutes on the new flight control build system. And so if you have slow builds anywhere, like you might like flight control because of this new build system. So we're super excited about that. And then the next big thing that we're going to be shipping is Lambda support. And so right now, Vercel is the only kind of managed platform that enables serverless Next.js deployments. And so we're going to be adding support for serverless Next.js deployments also. And then beyond that, deploying Lambdas for any language, whether it's a web request or even triggers from like SQS queues or databases or things like that. And so that's going to be exciting as well. So we really think that serverless versus servers is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Like each one has its own strengths and weaknesses, and you need the ability to use both whenever the situation kind of requires it. And the problem is that a lot of these platforms only support one or the other. And so then you get a lot of this dogma and, propaganda about, like serverless is the best or servers is the best, whatever. And it's just dumb because really you should have the ability on one single platform to choose from all the options and really do what works best for you.
Yes, I completely agree with this. I don't think that serverless is the future necessarily. I think that in a sense, sure, like it's different from what we had in the past, but it's not for everyone. It's not for all cases. And I think people are missing the point in there. So nice. Awesome. Okay. Let's start wrapping up and do a few rounds of promos as well. So, Chris, why don't you start?
No, I don't have much this week. I'll just point people to my blog, the chrisfru.in. Actually, yeah, I posted recently for one of my SaaS. I rewrote. I had a giant legacy .NET API, which I like .NET, but the way I grew the code base, it became too much of a mess, and I rewrote the whole thing in Go to much shorter, and it's still don't understand the performance of Go. I think they're really doing magic behind the scenes, but it's way more performant and yeah, it will be easier to maintain. So it's the blog post is about that. Not really the rewrite, but more of like philosophy, and like I also state that you know to clean at the very beginning because you just don't mean yet. Yeah, so I guess I'll post a link if my computer can keep up with me.
Okay. Your computer is definitely going kind of crazy, man. Like there were moments where your audio is like that I can't even reference it. But I do hope that this goes live this way because it's way more funnier than just the regular audio. Yeah, and I had that with my previous MacBook. It was Intel based, and it would just go crazy during a few meetings. So yeah, I totally get you. All right, man. So Peter, how about you?
Okay, yeah, so I just wanted to, not really more though, I just wanted to reference like a course I wrote on educative, more like a project though, on web components with Lead. So I just kind of experimented with Lead recently, and since I think there's been a kind of uproar for this open web advocacy and try to use the native web and web components for so much, so I decided to just test with Lead. So yeah, I posted the link on the chat. It's so yeah, I think that's just basically it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I've been hearing a lot about lit, so perhaps we should talk about this eventually. I will send both of your links in the comment section. So for those of you that are watching from YouTube or any other place that has a comment section, then you should probably be getting those links. All right, so Brendan, how about you? Like we, of course, talked about Like and Show, but anything specifically you would like to promote?
Yeah, a couple things. One is the Flight Control engineering blog. It's mostly me writing on there, but I've gotten really good feedback on the article that I've been putting out around Next.js, TypeScript, type safety, and things like this. So definitely check that out, flightcontrol.dev/blog. And then I also wanted to promote the idea of being a pilot and flying your own small plane, something I've been obsessed with since I was a kid. And so if anyone is interested in talking about that, you can find me on socials and chat it up.
Oh, so do talk a bit about that. Like you said, if anyone wants to know more about that, they should hit you up. But what can they expect from talking to you about this? Like, were you able to accomplish this goal? Like, are you officially a pilot? Are you in the middle of the process? How does that look
I
like?
started my training when I was 15 years old and got my license as soon as I turned 17, which is the minimum age. So I've been flying for a long time, and it's an absolute blast. Like just makes you feel like a bird. Just the level of freedom you can I can just go to the airport, get on my plane, and go fly anywhere I want in the United States.
That's so cool. Like, okay, that there are two levels of um nice things about what you said. So the first one is being a pilot and being able to fly, and the second is you saying I can just go to my plane. And I don't think that everyone could purchase a plane, but maybe that's another myth. Like, is that something that we can debunk quickly here? Like,
Yeah.
how
So
much would it cost for someone to have a popular plane?
almost everyone can learn to fly a plane. It's not hard. It only takes about 40 hours of training, so it's not super expensive either. Also, you can own a plane. you can buy a plane that's cheaper than a car. So, I drove a junker car for a long time so that I could buy a plane. Junker cars are totally fine. You don't need a $40,000 car. You can get a $40,000 plane, or even cheaper than that.
So $40,000, I can get a semi-decent plane.
Oh yeah, you can like 20 to in the 20, starting at like 20,000 is probably where the planes start. But you can also do shares. So buy a plane with a few other people. That is also common. But if you don't have a plane, you can always rent, and just on an hourly basis. And so that's really affordable. There's no commitment. You can just fly as much as you want on an hourly basis.
Interesting. Okay. What is the regular hourly basis to rent a plane?
I'm going to say $150 an hour. It varies on location, but approximately that. And that includes gas.
Okay, that's pretty fine. That's a reasonable number. Yeah. Okay. Like the thing that scares me about just having a like a nice plane, but not like a super top one, is that, I mean, it's a plane. You don't want it to fall, It's different than a car that is like, oh, if it's not working 100%, that's fine. Like, I can even push it a bit. But if I have to push a plane, then I don't think I'm gonna be able to tell the story. So that part scares me a bit.
All planes, no matter how much they cost or what they are, require annual inspections, or even more often. And so they go through this rigorous inspection process to make sure that they're actually airworthy. So that's part of the deal. Secondly, if your engine quits, it just turns into a glider, and you can just glide down and land on an airport or a field or road or anything. It's no big deal. And so it's also significantly safer than driving in a car. You're more likely to die in a car driving to the airport than flying your plane.
Okay. Still, the idea that the engine would stop and I would just have to glide until I find land, it's a bit terrifying. But yeah, okay, that's
it's something you cover in training. You practice it, it becomes just normal. So it becomes a non-event. So you definitely train for all the things that can happen. So it's a good fun process. It involves your mind. There's a lot of like regulations and navigation and things. So that's kind of in systems, fun to learn. And then there's also skills, the actual skill of flying. So it's a good kind of holistic activity in that respect.
Okay. All right. That's very interesting. Like, you definitely got me interested about that. And that explains the name of the company. So now knowing that the company is Flight Control, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Well, on my end, I'm just going to promote the two companies that produce the show. So Top End Devs, if you're interested in other shows, not just React related. And Unvoid is unvoid.com. And I'm actually the founder of Unvoid, so that's why I also speak about it that much. And we created a business model that is very different from what other traditional software agencies provide. We actually only charge clients after the tasks are delivered and approved. And that's just so much more client friendly, because every single company complains that when they hire outsourced developers or designers, they have to pay by the hour and they never know how much it's going to take. And if something takes longer than expected, sometimes there's the feeling that like, oh, that's actually because the professional that I hired maybe is not good enough, but then the company ends up having to pay for that. So it's just this really weird situation, and we fixed all those problems by bringing them to our side. So the problems still exist. It's just that we make it very client friendly, and all the complexities are leaned towards us. So we estimate the effort of tasks beforehand, and we present that to the client, and we only start the work once they approve. So they already know beforehand how much each individual task is going to cost. and we only get paid by our work after it's delivered and approved. So even after delivery, the client can still do quality assurance before they say that the work is actually approved. So it's a really interesting and very client-friendly business model. And it's so much that we are actually having to choose our clients, because we can't really say yes to all companies just because of human resources available. So it's a really good position to be in. But yeah, so that's it. If you're interested, unvoid.com on Void. That's it. Thank you for sticking up until the end. That was a really interesting episode, and I will see you in the next one.